you were early to pretty much everything. Flipping houses in the early 2000s, land investing 2020, and this battery energy storage 2025.
Direct mail always works. It seems to reach the right people. It's an older group a lot of times that we're dealing with, and they still are opening the physical mail and they pay attention to it and everything. And like, you really have to want to put in the time to understand how to value a piece of property correctly, what makes a good piece of land, what makes a bad piece of land.
There's just so much freedom around entrepreneurship, and I think being able to teach your kids like a skill that you have, it's a fulfilling life for sure. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Investing Podcast. So happy to have Pete Reese. We've known each other for years, Pete. I'm happy to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Ron. It's great to be back, and just excited to get into whatever stuff we're going to get into here.
Absolutely. Let's just start with actually, I think your story is even cool before you got into land investing. As far as your blogging business, everything like that. You're a serial entrepreneur. Talk about your background, like getting into entrepreneurship, getting your blog started, and we're gonna get to real estate, guys. Everyone listening, stay tuned, stay in it. But we're gonna start with just how Pete got started and the journey of where he got, or how he got to where he is today.
Yeah, so to take it all the way back, I never really wanted to work for someone. So I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial thing inside me, and I didn't know what kind of form that was going to take. Loved, I would always see these infomercials from Carlton Sheets. I don't know if you know who that is, but he would have this kind of homes for no money down and everything like that. This was probably back in the 90s, somewhere around there. So I always had that concept in my head that that's what I wanted to do. I actually bought that and never did anything with it. I think while I was in college, but anyhow, moved out to San Diego. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and then when I moved out here, kind of one of our first things after I got married to my wife is that we wanted to buy our home. Bought a home with FHA financing, and it was a fixer, about the cheapest thing in the area that we could afford. But got 3.5% down, and then we got in it. And I started doing a bunch of renovations myself. Very poor quality, but but they got done and really increased the value of the home, probably because the market went up a little bit as well
Mhm.
over that time period. And ended up selling that first house, made some money, and I don't know, maybe $30,000, something like that, 50,000, somewhere in that range. And I thought it was like $1 million at the time. So I kind of got the bug, and um, then just started buying and flipping homes at that point. This is the early 2000s. And I didn't really know what I was doing. There wasn't a lot of stuff online about it. I would just see shows on HGTV and all this kind of stuff, and it was kind of really interesting to me. Kind of caught the bug. Um, so we were doing some at the time some pretty more expensive homes were actually pretty good. So we buy something for like 800,000 and maybe sell it for 1 million, in that range. And then after closing costs and commissions and all that kind of stuff, our goal was always to make 100,000. So we were doing pretty well. Market ended up crashing, and thankfully we didn't get hit too bad. But we ended up with a number of things that we had to kind of sell off for a little bit of a loss or hold for longer than we wanted and all that kind of stuff. But it really scared me off from real estate for a while. And this was probably I had gotten my broker's license and everything, so I ended up um, just selling properties for other people, working with other investors, and I got out of kind of the investor game myself. But it was my own real estate company, and I wasn't working for like a large cobalt banker or anything like
Mhm.
that. Then kind of got a little bit burnt out with real estate. Started working with my wife. She was really into blogging, and she wanted to kind of take that business that she had. She was pretty successful with that, and kind of take that concept and get it out to other people. So we started an online education business around that, and that kind of led down a whole rabbit hole. Learned all about ads and um, online marketing and everything around that. So that was kind of my area. She dealt with sort of the concept of the blogging and the teaching and the courses and all that kind of stuff. And my job was the marketing and everything related to that. So that was great for a while. It kind of one of the things that she was really big into was travel blogging. And then when COVID hit, it kind of put an end to that. It was kind of tough to sell a course on travel blogging when the travel was kind of shut down. So um, So then that kind of got me back into real estate, and that's how I stumbled into land investing, and ended up, really going in headfirst on that. And that was end of, I don't know, what was that, 2020, maybe it was. And yeah, just started really doubling down on that and trying to build that business up as much as we could, and still have that business, and um, working on it every day, kind of built a really solid team around that. And we're still just buying and selling land. We're doing a lot of like little development projects with that. Not, when I say little, I mean, uh, normally minor subdivisions
Mhm.
rather than like major subdivisions related to that. And then recently, we launched a new company, which is in the renewable space. And that company is focused on battery energy storage systems. So BESS, they call it. So these are big utility scale batteries that plug into the grid, help with grid resiliency. Basically, they store power from renewables as well. When solar or wind is generating electricity, store it for a time when they can sell it back into the grid for a better price. So there's some arbitrage opportunities there. There's some availability things that are nice for the utilities to have. So it's going to be a growing area over the next, 5+ years at least.
Mhm.
And so we kind of positioned ourselves to try to take advantage of that. So,
Wow. Yeah, a lot to dive in here. One trend that I see here, Pete, though, is, and I talked to Seth Williams the other week, and he was very similar. He's been in real estate a long time, but he hasn't, not as diverse in terms of things outside of real estate. But you were early to pretty much everything, flipping houses in the early 2000s, blogging, education, blogging in like the early 2000s as well. And then you're teaching people about that. 2010, it sounds like around that you starting land investing 2020 and this battery energy storage 2025. Obviously we don't know what that turns into, the battery energy, but everything else like you are early to. Is there anything about your personality, is it your wife's personality, anything like that where like, okay, you're always open to finding new opportunities? What, because it's definitely a trend. It's four things, right? One, two, three, four. You can kind of say five things with the blogging and education kind of being separate. But anything that you notice in your personality, anything like that, where you find opportunities early?
I'm always looking. I'm always looking at things from that business owner's mindset. So my mind is constantly thinking. And to me, it makes sense to get into opportunities that are kind of like on the front end of the curve as things are really building. I don't want to get in too early, I guess, before there's an actual market. But as soon as I see all the signs there and everything, and it's in an area that interests me, I guess that's kind of been my trend.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things with this battery energy storage that kind of uh, are very clear to me that's where things are going. There's lots of federal tax incentives behind it, at least a 30% tax credit till it's locked in until uh, 2032 and beyond. At this point, the projections are that we will need 9 times the amount of capacity that we have now, just by the year 2030. The price of the batteries themselves and the technologies are improving rapidly. So the pricing of the batteries are going down, 25 to 50% a year, and it's kind of compounding in that way. So all these factors kind of combine to make me realize that it's it's where things are going. It's going to be a great opportunity. So I want to be in a place where there are tremendous amount of tailwinds, not headwinds,
Mm.
and things like that make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it's definitely a trend in terms of this. Um, Do you, because and some people are flipping business models every year, and that's not like a way to do things. Like you're going and getting to the top, and you're like, okay, that you see like a downward trend. Is that accurate? If you see like a downward trend in something, or see it like not being able to meet what your, I don't know, financial goals are, is that when you kind of like take a step back from a business?
That's probably how a lot of these things develop. Like I'm always looking to scale as much as we can. And at some point, you're going to hit some resistance. And maybe it's resistance just because of my lack of knowledge or the way I'm doing things or something like that. But whenever I've hit resistance in the past, that kind of has me kind of looking around and thinking, like, what else can I be doing? Is it changing changing the business in some way, changing the model in some way, or is it kind of sidestepping to an opportunity, maybe where I can leverage my existing skills in some way, and then take a new trend? And that's kind of what the concept was behind the battery energy storage. There's a lot of it that's related to the land business, so I can
Mhm.
leverage all my skills related to that, and then go in an area with a bunch of tailwinds behind it.
Let's that makes sense. Let's get to like the early days of your land flipping because I always remember you were an insanely high volume direct mail. Like you were spending, I would get you can tell us the numbers, but I would guess you're spending 10, 15, $20,000 every single month, maybe more than that pretty consistently in terms of direct mail. Talk about your early days and like the volume scaling up that business. Let's just get into the early days of your land flipping, which was 2020, late 2020, early 2021.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, I started from the beginning. I kind of had a higher baseline of what I wanted from the business, you know. So when I looked at the business, I thought like I wanted to be at a certain level that really was interesting for me, I guess. And I would see people starting and mailing 500 letters a month or 1,000 letters a month, and while that's probably a great place to start or whatever, I felt like I was sort of beyond that in my entrepreneurial journey. So I wanted to start at a level which really seemed like it could have a lot of impact. So my um, first mailer was 10,000 pieces, and I think 2 weeks later, I mailed 10,000 pieces. It got up to the point where I was mailing 100,000 letters a month. We don't do that much anymore. Like that was kind of, in hindsight, it's kind of wasteful. Like we probably should have been spending a lot more time refining our lists rather than just focusing on that number. And actually, your software helped out quite a bit with that. Actually, so we're able to really refine the properties that we're going after, so we have less waste in there. So yeah, that was kind of my thing. I had from going from that online education business, it kind of really trained me in that way about the scaling and everything. I mean, we for a number of years in a row, we were spending at least $1 million a year in Facebook ads, you know, and it was just a numbers thing.
Mhm.
So spend 1 million, get 3 million in revenue or something like that, but you could do it at the time. And so I was comfortable spending a lot because I was pretty confident that the return on investment was definitely going to be there. Like the return on investment in the land business was so much greater than what I was seeing in the education business.
Yeah, and 100,000 mailers, like you're spending whatever 60, $70,000 per month on direct mail. And again, it's just a numbers game at that point. Like, okay, if I can make, and I know the numbers with the land, like you're making probably $500,000 on that 70,000 mailers if you're being efficient. But that's the hard part when it's that type of volume. Like, how do you get everything from it? What was your what was your life like at that point, your staff like at that point? Because I'm sure it was overwhelming in terms of calls, or were you just throwing deals out really quickly? What did like your processes look like with such a high volume of mail?
Yeah, so we had built it up to basically um, a couple acquisition managers, but a team member pretty much for every part of the process. Had someone kind of just entering in, refining leads that were coming into the CRM. Kind of setting them up for the acquisition team. Someone evaluating the properties as they were coming in, putting a value on them. Obviously, we were using call center Pat Live at that point. Being the first kind of level on that. And then someone for doing due diligence reports, someone for reviewing all the due diligence of any properties that we got under contract. I had a couple people in the transaction department on the buy side and on the resale side. Um, Value add and marketing were the same person. And then myself and one of my daughters as well were working a lot in the business at that point. And then a COO for the team to kind of keep everything together. So lots of different pieces of the puzzle. We do still have a pretty large team, but it was larger then for
Yep.
sure. And there's a number of reasons for that. Like there was a lot of waste in that amount of spend. Like I said, we should have been spending more time on refining our list and maybe refining our pricing and things like that. Um, but the market was a little bit hotter then, so it was a little easier to sell everything that you got. So we had to realize that it had to be a little bit more selective, or a lot more selective in the properties that we buy now. So it's it's just kind of a little bit of a different level then, but we're still doing really well. But just not really focused on those huge numbers anymore.
What, if anything, like broke? How many? Do you know how many months you were doing that high of a volume or years?
I think probably for about a year,
Okay.
and then I was a long time. I was at like 50,000,
Mhm.
what I was trying to hit, and then
Yeah.
it was, I was kind of thinking, well, if I do 50,000, why don't I just do 100,000? So
Mhm.
that's what.
What if anything broke during those 100,000 mailer months, and like what was your adjustment process there? Like if it's just too much going on, like you couldn't handle the volume, did anything break with that volume?
um, I'm not sure that anything broke. I just noticed a lot of inefficiency, I
Mm,
guess you could say. I wasn't getting the type of return out of 100,000 mailers that I should have.
yeah.
So I felt like we were being a little bit wasteful, and that's really what it came down to. But
Yeah.
but in reality, I bet you if I ran the numbers and really thought about it, even if we were being somewhat wasteful, it probably is not a bad idea. It probably made money. It probably made sense in the big picture anyhow. But
I think naturally as you scale, whether it's Facebook ads, anything, any business really, like you scale up ad volume, you're going to become a little less efficient. Like maybe if you send 10,000 mailers a month, you're going to get 2 to 3 deals where you would think you 10x that, I'm going to get 20 to 30 deals. But realistically, it turns into 12 to 15 or 12 to 17. And it just definitely as you scale up, there's inefficiencies that come up. So what today, and was that like 2021, 2022, 100,000 mailers? What time period were we on there?
yeah, so that was like 2020. 3, I think, maybe like first half of 2023, maybe end of 2022, where we're really
Yeah.
doing as much as we can there, and then before and after that, we dialed it
Yeah.
back somewhat. So
So you talked about subdivides today. What does your marketing strategy look like to get those subdivides? Like, what does your business, your land business, look like today for getting those deals?
yeah, so we're trying to build lists where we've got properties that have enough road frontage to have it make sense, and in areas where we know the subdivide process is easy. So it starts with the list, obviously. And we are just mailing out, blind offers like we always have. And we're not doing, um, just neutral letters or anything like that. We're just doing the blind offers still, and trying to get the phone to ring or people to email, or or text in or whatever. But we're just trying to put together a deal. When they call in and they are interested in selling, we look at the property in detail and figure out what's kind of our max number that we can do, where we feel it gives us some downside protection as well as upside to make the deal work. So we've always been consistently thinking like, hey, we want to buy 50% of what we can resell the property for. That's kind of our rough
Hmm.
benchmark. We'll skew from that a little bit, depending on if it's a nice property, it's a nice area, all those, hot market, things like that.
Yeah.
Can change that number a little bit, but
So do you have a target monthly mailers now with that more obviously concise marketing strategy?
yeah, we're doing 20 to 30,000 a month.
Okay. So you're still doing a lot.
Yeah, we're still
Okay.
doing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Have you tested any? So when you're sending these blind offers, obviously, if you're sending subdivides and the market value might be $200,000 for the property, but once you subdivide it, it's worth $400,000. Are you doing anything creative for those offer prices where like you can get more than obviously if you offer 50% of what it's worth is $100,000, but realistically, if you can get 400 out of it, you can rationalize a higher offer price with those blind offers. Are you doing anything different or just 50% of the market value?
Yeah, so on those lot split ones, we're looking at 50% of what we think we're going to be able to resell it for after we split it and stuff like that.
And when
So
you're making those offer prices out, so you're doing that on the blind offers, is that accurate?
yes, yep.
And
So,
those um are there any strategies you're using to kind of come up with that predictive price before you send the blind offers out?
I've got someone on my team that's actually really good with pricing now. He
Mhm.
does he does things way more detailed than I used to. I've been, when I was doing the pricing, which was for much of our time, our company's been in business, is like just pretty basic, really. I just look at things at the county level, and then just come up with an average and go from there.
Mhm.
But he's looking at things much more detail, and um, he's got a process where he's screening out the outliers. He's doing things by distance rather than just like the county.
Mhm.
That's the thing. So I actually couldn't duplicate his process if he had to right now. He'd have to have him teach me.
That makes a ton of sense. And
Yeah.
what are your expectations on a monthly basis or whatever you want to say? If it's 300,000 mailers per year, like what are your deal expectations, profit expectations when you're sending that volume targeting subdivides specifically?
hmm Yeah, I mean, just as many deals as we can. I know I should probably be more detailed than that, but I just want to try to convert every single like potential deal that we
Mhm.
can, and it's a matter of it's always ups and downs. It's never as consistent as
Yeah.
I want it to be. But the other thing we try to do as well is we've been trying to look at on market opportunities as
Mm.
well. So those are harder to get, but we're constantly checking the areas that we like and for new listings and everything like that. And when these properties come in that look like they could where we can make the numbers work, we're putting in offers on those.
That makes you seem like a big like top line bottom line guy. Like if you're making money, like okay, let's
Yeah.
keep scaling this thing up, which makes a lot of sense. Like so many people get into the weeds on like too many little tiny metrics. Like is that really what's moving the needle? Like what and like so many people get so into the weeds like I said on these different things and you're like, okay, let's just am I making money or I'm not making money? If I'm making
Yeah.
money, okay, let's scale this thing up a little bit or keep doing what we're doing. If you're not making money, like okay, we need to cut back. Is that kind of how you've always been with business?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah. I'm probably not as into the weeds with the numbers as some people are. I mean, I like numbers and I think they're very valuable in some ways, but you're right. I do see a trend with people kind of getting really wrapped up in those and they kind of lose the big picture, I think.
Yeah, and if you're profitable and like you can scale up marketing and stay profitable, you're going to be making more money essentially. Like if you're doing 20 to
Yeah.
30,000 and you can keep the same profitability and you can do 50,000, you're going to make more money where everyone's like a lot of people right now I see are like really worried about obviously narrowing down their list and just being like okay, minimizing every expense, which is okay to an extent, but at the same time, you're minimizing some profit. It reminds me like when we first started doing this business, when everyone went like, I'm going to target out of county owners, tax delinquent owners. Like that's great. But I've bought from 100 sellers who live right next door to their property. And I'm sure you've done the same. I'm sure you've seen that over and over. Um, what in your mind has changed over the last 5 years since you've been in this business? You're going on 5 years in land. Um, and it's been a lot. There's been a lot of changes from all different aspects, marketing, laws, competition, everything like that. Like, what are the things that stand out to you in terms of change in the business?
Yeah. So the market is definitely not as hot as it used to be. I would and thankfully at the beginning of this business, I wasn't as picky in the properties that we were buying. So pretty much anything you put out there was going to sell
Yeah.
in a lot of these markets. Is I mean, uh, everything will sell at a certain point, but you don't want to sell at a loss. So you got to be you got to be real um, conscious of the properties that you're buying. For me, we want to be buying quality properties. So quality properties will always sell. We want to be buying in markets where there's just not a flood of inventory out there already.
Hmm.
So we're looking at those things really closely, and we didn't look at those things very closely at the beginning. So that's the biggest change. I know that a lot of land investors are really kind of focused on the owner financing thing right now. As for disposition, I just haven't gone down that road. I just still love being able to sell for cash. So especially if I'm going to hold the property, I just it's just not very interesting for me to hold a property for 5 years and get monthly payments on it. I'd
Hmm.
rather just, like, get a profit, move on, and reinvest that into something else. Crunching the numbers, it's really the numbers work out so much better than just even if you get a decent rate of return. Like, in my book, at least, I would rather just, continue with that business model. Now, I think there's a I think there's a place where you can sell things when they're under financing and then sell the note, as a strategy. But we really haven't gotten into that at all. We've done that a couple times, but not
Hmm.
really. So I think the biggest change is the market itself.
Real quick, guys, before we get back to the episode, if you're looking to get into land flipping, get your first land deal. We have helped so many people with our one-on-one coaching. If you guys want to schedule a call, learn more, hit the link below, landinvestingonline.com/consultation, schedule a call, and we'll help you out. You have been very consistent, as far as I know, and I think I'm correct with this. You've been very consistent, direct mail, direct mail, direct mail since the start of your business. Like, yeah, the volume changes. So many people are jumping into so many different aspects, and people are pushing cheaper aspects of marketing. Get into this business for $50 or whatever it is. Where I have seen a huge, huge uptick in the effectiveness of direct mail, especially over the last 6 to 12 months, where direct mail was really big. And then all these other things, ringless voicemail, all these AI things, texting, all these things with, you can't fake direct mail. Like, you can't fake put a stamp on. Like, you're putting that stamp on, it's costing you 60 cents or whatever it is. Have you seen what is, because you've been so consistent with your mailers over the last 5 years, have you seen like ups and downs with direct mail? Like, is it working better now than it did 12 months ago? What does that look like, if you have any, not numbers, but just instincts, I guess, around it?
Yeah, I think it's probably gone down in effectiveness over time, just because um, I think there's probably a lot more people mailing than there was at the very beginning when I started this whole thing. But it still is a good return on our money, and it's the best I've found. And I would love for it to be produce better results,
Mhm.
but it's always looking for better. But it's been the most effective marketing thing that we can find. I mean, we've tried pay per click and we've tried cold calling and never got into text messaging or anything like that. But the direct mail always works. It seems to reach the right people.
Yeah.
The people that it's an older group a lot of times that we're dealing with, and they still are opening the physical mail and they pay attention to it and everything, and they may not be, responsive to the other things.
Have you tested or played around with any more custom type mailers or postcards or anything like that? Because the biggest battle and the hardest thing with direct mail is you don't know when someone opens your piece of mail. You know what I mean? Like, if I send an email out, I can track email opens. If I
Right.
send text message out, like, yeah, you're going to get a lot higher response rate. But have you tested any? Because I think the biggest battle with direct mail, getting them to open the envelope, because there are thousands of mailers that just go in the trash every single day. Have you tested any other strategies to get a higher potential open rate?
No, I've thought about doing this stuff, where it looks like a handwritten thing or a stamp on there or postcards or anything like that. Our rep from we deal with Rocket Print and Mail, and
Mhm.
they always tell me that the letters like that we do are always the highest response rate over the postcards and everything. So I've actually never gone down that road with postcards or any of the other alterations. We've made changes to our letter
Mhm.
definitely over the years, but that doesn't really impact like the open rate, I'm sure.
It sounds like you've tested like neutral letters and stuff like that in the past. Is that correct?
No, we've never
Oh,
done
really?
neutral letters.
Nothing. Hey,
Yeah.
I've, it makes sense in theory why neutral letters would like get a higher response. And we've tested it over and over again. And it not only get less deals, we get less phone calls. And I think part of it is, why people like blind offers is because they don't need to negotiate. You know what I mean? Like, will they call and negotiate? Yeah. But you also have people that just appreciate your $80,000 offer, especially if you're offering based on subdivides and doing a good job of that. Like, you're giving a very, very fair offer in your mind, in their mind. And it's just a simple process for them versus a neutral letter, call and negotiate, give me your price. People don't know where to start with that. And it's not just a lower deal rate, it's a lower response rate, a lower callback rate. Um, what are your thoughts for people getting into land right now? Like, is it, you still think there's opportunity there? Is it niches? Like, what's your advice for someone looking to get into this business?
Yeah, I do. I definitely think there's a great opportunity. If you're the type, I think this business works for people that really are willing to get into the weeds to understand land.
Hmm.
And to me, that's kind of the people that I see being successful with it. Like, they really understand what a property is worth and how to evaluate things and really look at those properties. I see people get into trouble when they're overestimating what these things are going to be worth. Like, you really have to want to put in the time to understand how to value a piece of property correctly, what makes a good piece of land, what makes a bad piece of land, understand the markets that you're working in and everything. And if you're the type that gets into the weeds with all that stuff and really understands land, then I think you really got a shot to be successful at it. I think that people naturally will fall into some niches, um, whether that be subdivides or certain types of properties or selling lots to builders, or there's all kinds of like sub niches within this space. And unless there's something that off the top of your head, like say you were in the home building space or whatever, maybe that makes sense for you based on your connections to get into just selling lots to builders or
Mhm.
something like that. But I think a lot of people just sort of fall into a niche and they're like, well, that was easy. I could do that again and then again and that type of thing. So
Yeah, I like that. And one thing I always say, and I can be interested to get your thoughts on this. Like you talked about knowing land. I also think like this business has to be respected and treated like a business
yeah.
versus 5 years ago, like we saw anybody and everybody getting deals and making money in this business. Where now it's like, okay, you got to come into this business with like, okay, I'm going to treat this as a business. I'm going to respect it as a business. Do you see that as well, kind of being a way to, I guess, increase likelihood of success?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Putting systems in place, I know when you're starting, it's probably going to be you, and maybe an assistant, a VA or something like that. But as you build and everything, you really need to work on those systems, get these processes established. And it doesn't, that may sound daunting to some people, like, oh, I don't know how to do business processes. I mean, a lot of times it comes down to making a Loom video, just filming a little video how
Mhm.
you do these things and make sure it's done the same way every time. And then you hand that off to an assistant that will kind of take those things off your plate. And then you kind of build your team as you want to get more things off your plate. And the better the team that you can build, the better the business you'll have as well.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's that's so important. Just like processes, systems, especially as you hire, like record things when you first get started in this business. Like you're recording it for nobody at this point, but eventually like being able to not get rid of, but offload some monotonous tasks that are done every day, every other day, whatever it is, even if it's just sending mail to Rocket Print or wherever you're sending your mail to. Talk about you do a lot of your businesses with your wife, obviously, blogging, all these things. I know she was in your land business. How has that worked out? Like, talk about some of your, because a lot of people like want to get into a business like this with family. You're doing it with your daughter and your wife. I don't know if there's anybody else in your family doing it with you as well. But talk about the dynamics with that, how you balance things, how you've made that work so successfully.
Yeah, it's just kind of always what we've known, and we've always done that type of stuff together. Um, a lot of times she is on the back end, doing our accounting, bookkeeping, doing the banking, all that kind of stuff, which frees me up to kind of do what I'm best at, which is putting together deals and, talking with people and all those kinds of things. So that's kind of how it naturally evolved. We get along really well. So, if there was a lot of tension there, obviously it's probably not a great idea to work with your spouse or a family member if you don't get along so great. But we don't have that problem. And getting my kids involved has been great. Like I feel like they have skills now that they could just take and always available to them if they wanted to make money in land in some way. It's always there for them. So that's been really fun for me, and just not just teach them about land, but teach them about business and life, everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I
freedom.
think it's great if you could do it. So
100%. There's just so much freedom around entrepreneurship, and I think being able to teach your kids like a skill that you have, so like they have the ability. Maybe they want to go work for someone when they're older, but if I had the skills to be an entrepreneur, like and pass those on to kids, like that's amazing. And giving the ability to do that, just it's a fulfilling life for sure. Let's get to, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, talk about the darn battery storage. Talk about how that came about. I know you talked a little bit about it. What actually is that? You talked about your land skills being transferred to that kind of business model. What exactly does that business? And I'm asking for myself too. So I'm going to ask a lot of basic questions for myself and the listeners. But like, what does that look like? Are you finding land and then doing what?
yeah. Okay. So this was a little bit of an evolution for me as well, because I initially was planning to get into solar farm development,
Mm,
and that I kind of stumbled into through our land business. I would see solar farms, and I was thinking about it, and I was reading about it, and watching videos, and about that business, and really, it's simply another form of development, like you would develop a residential subdivision or even a minor subdivision, something like that. You just take a piece of land and you get it approved for the solar farm, and then you sell it off to whoever's going to build it generally. and you've created value by getting that approval there. So I was originally going to get into solar development. We did a deal on a property. We're still in the deal, but where we bought the property and immediately went under contract to a solar developer for quite a bit more than we paid for it. They're just working on getting the project approved, and as soon as they get it approved, then they close at that higher price. So it's kind of a win-win. So that's kind of got me thinking along those lines, and I was like, well, we can do that. I can get up to speed on solar development pretty quickly. I can hire some experts that are already been doing that stuff in that space and can move the company forward in that way. And so that's what we were going to do. It's first business or anything I've owned where I've actually raised outside capital, always bootstrap things. But for the development business, renewable energy development, it's like a year or two of just putting money out, and then before you get any sort of revenue in. So I thought it was an interesting opportunity to bring on some investors that I have been working with in the land development space, and then allow them to participate in the upside as well. So, but anyhow, we were going down the road with solar, and then right as we were about to launch, they passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which pretty much put a nail in the coffin of solar for the time being, at least. They took away the tax credit, which is a large portion of that business. It basically made the numbers work. It made the financing work and everything. And they basically took that away. But what they did in that bill was they solidified the tax credits for the battery energy storage business. And I realized it, and I was like, well, I started doing more research about that, and I realized that's kind of a better opportunity than the solar. So then we just pivoted and switched to battery energy storage systems. And thankfully, it was a time right before we launched. The chief development officer that we are bringing on had extensive storage in both solar and battery energy storage, so it really ended up working out pretty well. But essentially, what it is these are kind of if you think of a shipping container, it looks like shipping containers with batteries inside and other electrical equipment and things. And these are generally placed on pieces of land that are very close to like an electrical substation. These are generally the very ugly, um, chain link fenced areas that you see in a lot of areas where it's all this electrical equipment and stuff. So you want to be as close to those as possible. And a lot of times you're in an industrial area or an area that's maybe not the greatest area or whatever, but these are perfect for battery energy storage facilities. So essentially, these are facilities that just store energy and then dispatch it into the grid when it's needed most. So these could be, at nighttime when power peaks, but there aren't renewable energy assets on the grid like solar or wind that are actually producing the energy at that point. So it stores it when in a lot of these areas, there's an arbitrage opportunity. So what they do is they charge these batteries when the electricity costs are very cheap, and then they dispatch them into the grid when they can get a higher amount for that energy. So there's an arbitrage there. They also have contracts that they do with utilities to be ready to dispatch power, if it's needed, when there's a big load on the grid and things like that. So essentially, what we're doing is we are getting these properties under contract. These are either for a lease or a purchase, and then we are going through the steps in order to get these projects approved for these battery energy storage facilities. And then once we get past certain hurdles, then that creates value, and that allows us to sell these projects to later stage developers that will actually build out these projects. And these are very high dollar projects. These are, maybe 50 to $100 million projects in some cases that are, get built. But, there's a lot of incentives for them to build them. Obviously, the grid needs them. There's huge tax credits. So say it's $100 million of build costs for these projects. Just the 30% tax credit, which is the minimum, they get $30 million right off the bat, which is also saleable on the open market. They can sell those tax credits to tax credit investors for like 95 cents on the dollar. So Yeah, so there's a lot of incentives to do these projects. There's accelerated depreciation as well, 100% in the first year. Like so, there's for certain investors, it really really makes sense to invest in these projects. Now,
Hmm.
we don't. Um, we're kind of the early stage developer, so that means that we're not actually getting those tax credits or anything like that. But the project that we are developing is worth more because then the next stage developer can do what they need to do with it and um, get the investors and all that kind of stuff to actually build it out. So
So essentially, entitling it for this very specific use. Is that accurate?
that's
To say
correct.
you're not doing anything physically with the land, correct?
Generally, at this stage of our business, we're not planning to get into the building or anything like that. We're just it's pretty much there's a couple major hurdles in a lot of these projects that you try to get past. It's kind of the local approvals, so you may have um, get a conditional use permit or get the project approved to be put there locally, permit for it, and then you also have a situation where you've got to get an interconnection with the utility.
Hmm.
So basically, these utilities they make you do these studies, and the studies will come back and they'll say, okay, we'll let you connect, but you've got to pay us $10 million in upgrades to the grid in order to connect or something. So they'll generally in a lot of these cases they'll have some sort of requirement for you to connect, and generally those will be passed on to kind of the next stage developer and just kind of worked into their numbers as a whole. But that affects the value of your project as well.
Yeah, for sure. So are you with you said you have a developer on staff. So he's
Yeah.
kind of are they putting together full kind of plans for the end buyer? Does that what that look like? Is it more just the zoning aspect?
Yeah, so they work through primarily working through both that interconnection piece and also the local approvals. And it's a little bit more complicated. Like you generally have to get like environmental reports.
Hmm.
You got to make sure you have clean title. And all these things kind of come into the big picture. But a lot of times it comes down to is there going to be any local resistance to this project, and is there going to be any big issues in connecting with the utility?
Got it.
So those are kind of the big hurdles that you come over.
And during this whole time, like, what are your contract periods like with the sellers? Like, how long are those contract periods?
Yeah, it could be 5 years.
Hmm.
Now that's until it depends on the area, depends on the grid. That would be until the project would get like fully built out. So, but in a lot of these cases, we're not going to be holding the project anywhere near that length. Maybe a year to two in a lot of cases to get us past those kind of initial stages.
Yeah. And how much money do you have going out, or maybe it's the investors or whatever? How much money is going out basically for these studies, for all these different aspects where it could still get denied and you can't get pushed through? Is there a large sum of money that's going out prior to be guaranteed? I would guarantee it's probably not the right word, but prior to even getting approvals.
Yeah, it's a risk. So there's money that you need to spend on kind of uh, getting the project set up with engineering and kind of getting it mapped out. You have environmental reports. You have deposits that are paid to landowners. These could be a yearly option fee or something like that. And then with these utilities, depending on the utility, they have uh, that's kind of the most expensive part. In a lot of cases, they have these interconnection deposits that you need to pay or study fees that you need to pay them. And a lot of times these interconnection deposits are refundable, like 90% refundable or something, depending on the area. But you still have to place a large amount of cash out
Hmm.
of pocket, and then with the hope that it's going to get approved.
Yeah. What's your expectations on like profit on one of these deals? Obviously, it can range. I'm just curious on what the numbers look like. You're probably, and we can get into actually, let's just talk about that first. Like, what does like a normal deal look like? Obviously, you haven't taken one full cycle yet, but you
Right.
have
Right.
projections, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of these areas, a couple $1 million
Yeah.
for a project, and you're hopefully selling a portfolio of projects in a certain grid. So you might have 10 projects, and or 5 or something like that, and they're kind of different stages,
Mhm.
and then that allows the buyer of your portfolio to sort of spread out their risk a little bit. Like, it may be a portfolio of 5 projects, and 3 of them are good, but 2 of them are bad, but at least the good ones are gonna make up for the bad ones. It's kind of like, not fully similar, but kinda like what venture investors do, they're just
Mhm.
looking for the successes more than outweigh any sort of losses that they have on ones that don't work out, so.
You said earlier about like industrial land is kind of the target for these. Like what size, what exactly as far as like is it I guess industrial makes sense in terms of that. Is it smaller cities, bigger cities, combination of the two? And then what size do these parcels look like?
Yeah, so a lot of times, these properties don't need to be that large. You might have a footprint of 3 to 5 acres,
Hmm.
for the actual facility itself. Obviously, these properties can be much larger, that doesn't matter, but that's generally the footprint that you need, and it really depends on the size of project that you're gonna do. Like, these can vary tremendously, um, and that kinda changes where they're located sometimes too. Like, the larger projects are probably gonna be closer to larger population centers, and then they have distributed projects, DG projects, they call them, which are, um, they'll be smaller projects, they may be in more rural areas, and, they're gonna be worth a little bit less, but they may be a little easier to get.
Wow. This is all cool. That's crazy how that one bill kind of made you change ship. I mean, not fully.
Yeah.
Like it's they're I don't know. They're similar, obviously, but it's not the exact same thing as building a solar farm.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to think. I don't think I have any more questions on that. That's a awesome business. It's cool that where are you learning all this? Is it your development partner? Is it a combination of things? Just reading, watching things. Where are you learning all this in terms of the battery storage? Because this is a aspect of business or land that I had no clue about until today, essentially.
Yeah, it's been a journey for me, lots of stuff on YouTube, reading books, um, talking to lots of people in the industry, and kind of combining all that to get together. Use AI a lot
Yeah.
to learn, like help me, when I have specific questions about things, like putting the puzzle together. It really helps in my mind
Hmm.
to um, to do that. So yeah, it's just been kind of a process, and I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning about the land investing business, so I feel like it's just a constant process. And when I'm really interested in something, it doesn't feel like a burden in any way.
Hmm.
It's kind of, I just want to know more, so I'm like continuously searching out new sources. So I spend all my free time like
That's
watching
awesome.
videos and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find you? I really appreciate you coming on here. Where can people find social media, anything like that? Where can people find you, Pete?
Yeah, so I haven't been doing a lot on social media lately, but probably, if you're kind of interested in what we're doing on the battery energy storage, there are companies called Sunland America, so you could see sunlandamerica.com. We do have a couple of slots left for if you're interested in being a seed investor on that. So got about 3/4 of the money raised, and obviously that kicks us off and gets us going and everything like that. But there is a couple slots there. There's a little page on there for investors if you're interested in seeing what that looks like. And then yeah, so I haven't been posting a lot on social media, I guess you could say, but I want to. We've got our podcast called Turning Profit, which is on YouTube. So been um, not as consistent on that lately, but that's going to change.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you coming on here. It was a pleasure. It's cool seeing your journey because I remember so vividly, like when you first started and posting things in Discord, and I see your volume of mail, everything like that. And I remember like it was inspiring to me. Like Pete's doing all this stuff and he's sending all this mail. And at first I thought like there's no way. And then I talked to you once. I'm like, he's definitely sending that much mail. And just like going full force into the business. Other than that, Pete, I really appreciate you hopping on. If you guys are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button below. We will link Sunland America in the description below if you guys want to click, check it out. Really cool. And then Turning Profit on YouTube as well. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody.